Hello, hello to everybody. We are so excited to be here today for the first part in our series on performance improvement. This will be a video log for everybody to view and share questions and comments and start an engaging conversation. My name is Kristen Kosinski, and I am a coach and consultant. My interest in all of this is that I actually started and ran a nonprofit organization in the community development, international development space called the Samburu Project. I ran the organization for 10.5 years. Our focus was clean water as a foundation to development. And our work was based mainly in northern Kenya, in an area called Samburu. The organization is still thriving without my leadership, which is super exciting as a nonprofit founder. And with me today, and I will let them introduce themselves, are Roger Addison and Klaus Wittkuhn. And they're going to be giving us presentations. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves just for a moment so we know who we're talking to today. So Roger, why don't you start?
Hi, I'm Roger Addison. I am a performance consultant, also a performance architect, which comes from the book that I wrote on performance architecture. And I've been doing this work for longer than I want to tell you, but probably over 30 years. And I've done work all over the world. Actually, I've been to over 50 countries, not only as a visitor, but also doing work in 50 countries.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And Klaus, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Klaus. Hello. Roger and I share the same passion, like we like to combine travel and work. So we both have worked all over the world, and this is how we met finally at the International Society for Performance Improvement, which means I'm a consultant also for decades in industry. And then some 15 years ago, we started working for USAID also in a number of countries and across all sectors like healthcare, energy, education. So we finally have a number of projects that we have experience with. Excellent.
And interestingly, I also like to travel and work, and that's how the Samburu project got started. So yeah. We're all in this together.
That's right.
Yeah. So Klaus, I think you'll begin your presentation first.
Yes, because this is a little experiment. It might be easier then. We'll see along the way. I might bring in Roger.
We can make this a work in progress. That's perfect.
Yes. Then let me quickly share my screen. So we prepared a little presentation just to introduce a few basic ideas that we then finally can discuss and that we can build on during the blocks to come during the month of July. What you see here, we are quite convinced that when you think performance improvement, you can take what we call an engineering approach. You know, like you think engineers design and build bridges. So as a performance consultant, you can design and finally implement organizations and improve performance throughout all levels of an organization. So we called it essentials because it's really down to the very basics, and we try to connect it with how we experienced USAID. Now, if you look at this, obviously, if you take an engineering approach, you have to follow a systematic process. And in the case of performance improvement or local capacity development, we are convinced the best way to do it is start from results backwards, define desired results. Then you have to understand what are the factors determining those results. And usually things are multi-determined. It's not only one thing that drives those results. So you have a bunch of, you could say, variables, factors that influence results, which forces you into, you have to develop some kind of a performance model. You have to understand how those factors work together, because they not only one-sidedly influence the desired results, they influence each other's also. You know, and this is what we call a performance model. Then once you have this model, you try to develop hypotheses on what are the changes that would lead to the desired results, that would lead to improvements. And then you have to make a decision, what are we going to try? And deliberately we say, what are we going to try? Because whatever you do, name it organization, system, or whatever, but any intervention you take is hypothesis based, which means it might work out or it might not. You know, you do the best that you can, but we say it's a try. And we always aim for, take a minimal invasive approach. Like think of a mobile. You know, you pull one piece and then you can see the whole mobile is going to change and all other things fall into place. But you do not exactly know in advance how this is going to work out. Now, once you make up your mind, then you have to take action. And because it's a try, you have to observe what is happening. And then you have to adapt your model and your approach along the way, necessary. So this is what we think is like a very basic description of a process one should follow.
I love the picture you chose here for this slide, because it shows a group of people in Rwanda actually mapping out a whole process. And it was a great experience for me to watch these people look at their process and then map it out. So thanks for choosing that slide.
Yeah, I love this also, which was a really nice project. Everybody was excited. Roger and I trained consultants in Rwanda, and they were meant then to consult ministries, you know, and local governmental bodies to improve performance. It worked out quite well until the very end. And then we learned that shortly after we left the country and the project closed, everybody, really everybody that had been trained in this project to become such a consultant was assigned to a different job.
Oh.
So the net total, you could say, was, although everything worked out quite well and people were excited and they learned tons of things how to do it, the net total was kind of a complete failure because somebody way up in hierarchy then decided he can make better use of those guys.
Well, hopefully they took some of their learnings into whatever the next thing they did.
Yeah, we stayed connected with some of them. So yes.
I think they did. Yes, they did. Yes.
One of the things I love about this model, having run a nonprofit NGO, is about this idea of trying as opposed to, you know, so much of when I was doing my work, it's like I felt like I needed to know everything and needed to know exactly how I was doing it. And I think this is a much gentler way of approaching it because, you know, it was definitely a system of trial and error. And I like this idea of making it a practice rather than like something you fully know exactly what you're doing, because then it gives a lot of leeway for learning in the process.
I think from my perspective, what you do is that a lot of people already have the basic concepts, they just don't know what to call it. And so we learn as much as sharing our information as they share their information with us and make those adjustments along the way. So that's good. Okay, ready?
Yeah, and I mean, you find what I described here, you find this built into the work at USAID also.
Right.
Not exactly like I describe it here. We will come back to this later, but you find it. You know, it's somehow built in the local systems framework. You certainly, you know, this learning loop you see in the CLA, in local capacity development, I think they come close to it also. So it's not like we are talking about a completely new idea here. We are basically talking about what happens all over the world already.
Klaus, what is CLA?
This is I'm bad in remembering those acronyms, but it's a learning cycle, where you adapt along the way continuously.
Okay.
So you do things, you learn along the way, and then you adapt.
Okay. So it's similar to that. It's part of that process.
Yes, and this is, as far as I understand it, core of the USAID methodology. Meanwhile, so there's this CLA approach behind each and everything, which does not mean that all the systems already have been redesigned to match this.
Okay, it is actually collaborate, learn, and adapt.
Right.
I wasn't quizzing you. I had a little birdie that.
No. I didn't have the feeling that you quit. It's only like I'm really notorious when once I have an acronym, I forget it. I forget what it
I'm
means.
with you on that.
Yeah, but it's what it said. Okay, so we are not talking about something that is completely new. Still, what we think is there are two pieces that need more emphasis if you think performance improvement. And the first thing is the first step, like defining desired results, because this defines what you finally want to see as performance. And what one has to know if one talks about performance is that there are different levels of performance. And those levels are to a certain degree independent from each other. It's in an organization or whatever you do, always people are involved. So therefore, when something goes wrong, the first hypothesis is always like somebody did not know how to do it or somebody did not want to do it. It's like people are some of the core causes for the problems, which in many cases is not true. And one can easily see this once one makes the distinction of different levels of performance. And what you see here in the graphic is a simple illustration in an organization. You could say, yes, jobs on the job level where you find the performance, people can be able to do a job better or not as good as other. There is something like performance on a job level. I'm a little cautious because usually this does not automatically mean this is human performance. Because, if people do a job, this depends on many factors also. It depends on having clear objectives. It depends on getting timely feedback. It depends on the incentives that are around the job. It depends on having the necessary resources and stuff like that. All this is different from knowledge and skills. And people might do a bad job because those other factors, are not good enough to support them in their job. So bad human performance does not automatically come down to a lack of knowledge and skills. But if it's not a lack in knowledge and skills, training does not make sense. Then you have to do something else.
From my experience, that if you show people a map sort of like this, they start getting the idea that things are all linked together. It's just not the people or the individual performer, but it's also what those people do and in the context of an organization where they do it. So if you look at it from the standpoint of what we call it anatomy of performance, if you look at it from that standpoint, this picture has helped me many, many times of just getting an understanding of what the organization looks like.
Yes. There is I will give you a very simple example, which is from industry. And it's in hindsight, once you hear it, it really sounds stupid, but it is a perfect illustration for how the different levels of performance are largely independent from each other. Imagine, I'm from Germany. So imagine like Mercedes produces car in the southern part of Germany and they have to deliver them to Cologne. So they drive them, they put them on trucks, on the production side, then they drive to the harbor, they go on a ship, the ship goes up the river, Rhine, and then to the harbor in Cologne, they go on a truck again, and then to the local dealership. Might take 8 days. Now they try to be faster, and the idea is they develop training programs to improve the performance of all the guys in the process. And they can show at the end of the program was highly successful. People who used to drive 50 cars per day on a truck, after the training could drive 75 per day on a truck, which is a 50% improvement in performance. Now, the truck still needs the same time to go to the harbor. The ship still needs the same time to go up the river, So those 8 days as delivery time basically do not change.
Yeah.
Although people perform better when you look at their job. So you could say the performance of the process is to a certain degree independent from the performance of the people in the process. It depends on how you organize the processes. Call a university and say, guess what? I need a student with a driver's license. I have a job for him. You hand him the key of the car and say, drive the car to Cologne tonight. You can do this in 4 hours. Then you come down from 8 days to 4 hours.
Wow.
You might not want to make a student drive a $100,000 car at night on the highway. So everything has its advantages and disadvantages.
Right.
But it really shows process is a different level of performance than from human performance and jobs.
Yes.
And this is true for unit performance, for organizational performance. This is even true for sector performance, like a healthcare sector. This depends on many different factors that are independent from what people do in their jobs.
Would it be fair to say that a person is only as good as the process?
Yes, I would say as a rule of thumb, yes. You find individuals that detect clever workarounds. All those things happen in organizations. But if you think as in a standard, or you want to have organizations that enable people, and then you would say, yes, persons are as good as the organization that supports them.
Yes.
Keep
So
it
just
simple.
from a timing perspective, I just want to let you know, we are probably about 12 minutes in right now,
Okay.
maybe even further. So
Yeah.
we just want to,
Okay,
I want to be mindful of the time.
That's good. Then let's very quickly move on.
Yeah.
What you see, and the second thing is, I took this out of official USAID material, and you can see when they talk about systems level and systems thinking, they are very high up. And this is something that should be emphasized more, because no matter what level you look at, the things are always determined by a number of factors that influence each other, which means you can take a systems thinking approach on an individual level also.
Yes.
And then you get many more options. You see many more things than only training to improve things there. So those are two very basic things. There's a think in levels of performance and take it seriously to say you have to understand the factors that drive performance on an individual level also. And then you end up with a form of systems thinking. And then you have something like you have nested systems. Human performance is integrated in process performance, which is integrated in organization performance, which is integrated, into sector performance. And you can scale the same view up and down. This thinking already had been published by USAID itself. In 1999, they did an empirical study, and this was in healthcare. And you see the reference down here, training alone is not enough, as an article. They shrinked it. What you see here, like provider performance, they came down to, let's say, like 5 clusters of factors influencing it. And they did it in a handful of countries. In none of the countries, knowledge and skills came up as the #1 factor to drive provider performance. The highest ranking of knowledge and skills was #4.
Wow.
So what is more or less important varies from context to context. But what we show here essentially has been used by USAID for many years. It never, let's say, it never found a huge audience, you know. There were some people doing it, but somehow it did not spread. Okay, so the most important factor across many countries was non-monetary incentives, which provides a lot of possibilities, you know, how to do this. And the least important, usually knowledge and skills. Now, last thing, I took this from Mervyn King, used to be the governor of the Bank of England. Now, we do not have to think banks, but I think what he says here, like we should rely less on gifted people and think, you know, if people are gifted enough, if we train them enough, they will do it. We should think more in organizations and structures that support people. And then we need professionally competent people to probably deliver, in the best case, world-class results. And I think this is right to the point. This is what we try to illustrate with those two simple ideas.
Yeah, from my experience working over many, many years, that I often found that training was often the first thing that was requested. But actually, when we got right down to it, the people could do the work. It was something in the environment getting in the way that they were not being proficient. So if you can look at the environment, get rid of those things in the environment so people can do their jobs, they do their jobs. And I think that's up to management to certainly. So again, I think Klaus has a point of having a good management system to go along with this makes a major difference in something getting done in the organization. So that's what, at least from a standpoint of what I've seen historically.
Yes.
And the interesting thought about this is that so often what we hear in lots of different kinds of organizations is like, oh, get the people the training, strengthen the people, and they're not looking at the system itself. It's like they're throwing a lot of money and energy and time into training when it's not really about training at all. I mean, this could go well beyond, you know, international development.
Since 1999, when I first was introduced to USAID, I've heard that they did a lot of training and didn't get very much return on their investment. I mean, this has been going on now for years and years and years. And I'm just hoping one of these days they will turn the corner and look at the whole system and how it all works together. So that's just my bias, at least.
Yes. We had a colleague that once said, put a good person into a bad system and the system will win almost any time. You know, and I think that's exactly right. Try, you know, if you think performance, think organization or system first. You know, build the system in a way that it supports people, and then it'll work. If you
so how do you do that? That's the $1 million question.
No. I mean, if you look at HICD, and this is, I mean, now it's integrated in local capacity development, there is really a methodology behind it to analyze organizations, to see where are the gaps in the organizations that should be closed so that people really can unfold their potential.
Well,
this is
it might be a point where you have to convince organizations of the value of looking at the organization as a whole rather than the individuals.
Well, I think because people always go back, there's something wrong with the individual, not with the organization. So I think
it's kind of easy to blame the individual, right? Rather than the entire entity.
You see them there and they're not doing something you think they should be doing. Therefore, let's train them. And that's often not the case. I mean, you saw their own study from 1999 where training was not always really the answer. It was something else.
Yes, it has a few, let's say, technical problems, because if you take the perspective of senior leadership, you know, they usually have the idea of make something or somebody in the organization change to solve the problem, not me. You know, I basically task the organization to change. Now, if you look at it and says, it might need changes in the organization to achieve this, then Senior leadership is part of the problem because
Yeah.
they are responsible for the design of the organization. You know, so therefore, yes, it needs a little bit of convincing at the beginning.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's this idea of, not looking outward and blaming, but looking inward and taking responsibility.
Well, and this has been going on since 1950s, when Deming was telling us it's management's issues often that are causing the problems, not the individual performers. I mean, this has been around since the 1950s thinking.
So we're going to have to wind it up here in a minute. I guess what I'd like to do is get final thoughts, and I want to ask those who are watching this to put questions in the comments so that we can continue this conversation.
Great.
So would you guys like to give your final thoughts on this?
Well, my final thought is that you've got to look at the people, the workers, the work that they do, and the workplace they do it in, and integrate all those three systems, and then bring in some type of organization. And I know this is Inclusion Month, trying to look at all the people and include all the people in that process makes a major difference from what I see.
Thanks, Roger.
Coming back to what you said, Roger, Deming already said in the 50s that like 70 to 80% of the problems organizations are facing are not connected to people.
Right.
You know, he had organization processes in mind. And therefore, as a final thought, I would say, if you think performance, analyze and do an analysis, look at people only at the very end. You know, look at the organization. Try to understand whether this organization is really helpful in supporting people to deliver desired results. And if you find gaps there, close them before you do anything with people. It's not a good strategy to train people to compensate for organizational deficiencies, not in the long run.
That's a great line.
It's expensive too.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the vlog, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you then. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.